Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new Ace in a Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode we shall be reviewing the J1N1, a Japanese heavy fighter coming at a tier of 1 and a battle rating of 1.7. For the purposes of today's historical overview, as there's quite a vast history to the J1N1, I will be focusing on the first half of the J1N1's history, where it was implemented as a heavy fighter stroke reconnaissance fighter, and we'll be covering the night fighter of the J1N1 at a later date. With that, let's begin. With the Second Sino-Japanese War well underway by 1938, the Imperial Japanese Navy, the IJN, soon realised that their bombers, for example the Mitsubishi G3M, were required to operate far beyond the range of the in-service escort fighters, i.e. the Mitsubishi A5M, this being due to the physical size of China as a country. To resolve this issue, the IJN believed that a long-range escort fighter was required and subsequently formalised this in mid-1938 with a design specification. The aircraft was expected to be a 3-seat twin-engine plane, have a normal operating range of 1,496 miles or 2,408 kilometres and a maximum range of 2,302 miles or 3,706 kilometres, be able to reach a top speed of 322 miles per hour or 518 kilometres an hour, have the manoeuvrability to deal with contemporary single-seat fighters, and beyond with an offensive pairing of 20mm cannon and 7.7mm machine guns and defensive machine guns. The specification was issued to both Mitsubishi and Nakajima, with Katsuchi Nakamura leading the Nakajima design team, which put together the J1N1, a low-wing monoplane armed offensively with one 20mm Type 99 cannon and two 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns as mounted in the nose. Defensively, it was armed with two pairs of 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns mounted behind the cockpit in experimental hydraulically powered remote control barbettes. The plane was to be powered by two 1,130 horsepower Nakajima Sake 21 or 22 radial engines. With the prototype flying for the first time on the 2nd of May 1941, it was soon discovered that the plane's manoeuvrability was subpar. To counter this, leading edge wing slats were added to the second prototype, the plane depicted on screen today, which vastly improved its manoeuvrability. However, when service trials began in August of 1941, the J1N1 failed to live up to expectations, as the second prototype experienced engine reliability issues and the defensive barbettes proved difficult to aim. Moreover, 2 years of development work would come back to haunt the J1N1, as Mitsubishi's response to the original specification, the A6M2 Raisin, proved to be superior in all regards, bar range, takeoff distance and defensive firepower. Hence, in October of 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy decided to reject the J1N1 as a long-range escort fighter, proceeding with the Zero instead. Nonetheless, the story of the J1N1 continued, with the IJN realising that the plane's long range and speed would make it a good recon plane. The IJN ordered Nakajima to convert the design into a reconnaissance aircraft, resulting in the J1N1C variant. This variant saw the removal of all armament, with the defensive machine guns being replaced by a single 13mm Type 2 machine gun in order to save weight. The J1N1C entered production in July of 1942 following successful trials of 4 prototypes starting in April of that year. These planes all featured improved Sake 21 engines, improved in terms of their reliability. A total of 54 reconnaissance aircraft were produced by March 1943, with the plane introduced to service in autumn of 1942. Interestingly, when this variant of the aircraft was first spotted by American forces over the Solomon Islands, it was mistaken for a new fighter type and given the codename Irving. Over time, this variant was redesignated to the J1N1R to denote its reconnaissance role, and some of the final production aircraft would see the 13mm defensive machine gun replaced with a 20mm Type 99 cannon as mounted in a spherical turret. These planes were redesignated as the J1N1F variant. As of the spring of 1943, development work of the J1N1 into a night fighter was to begin, but we'll come back to that in a later review. With our historical overview concluded then, let us take a look at how the J1N1 handles in the skies of War Thunder Arcade. Today's gameplay is brought to you from the ground strike map, Gorge. For this we'll be using the following setup. Stealth belts are our offensive machine guns and armoured target belts are our defensive machine guns, the reason in both cases being that these are the most powerful belts on offer in my experience. As for our offensive 20mm cannon, we're using the stealth belts. Now if we were solely hunting enemy fighters, we would have gone with the tracer belts, as they consist solely of high explosive fragmentation tracer, and when you're accurate on target, those shells are going to absolutely rip apart an enemy fighter. But as our role is going to drift into bomber interception every so often, the 2 armor-piercing incendiary rounds conferred to the stealth belts give us the ability to deal greater damage to those more durable bombers, in the fact that these rounds will be able to go through armoured sections of the enemy bomber and do considerably more damage to key components such as engines, whereas the high explosive fragmentation shells may let us down a little bit, hence our selection. Our gun convergence for our offensive armoured is set to 500 metres, as it's all based in the nose and therefore not convergence reliant, and as for our fuel load, we are taking the minimum load of 31 minutes to ensure we can make it to the end of the game, unscaled on fuel capacity. We begin our analysis then by noting that the climb rate of the J1N1 for its battle rating is above average, in that when you are the top battle rating aircraft, you'll be able to outclimb the early monoplanes and the biplane dual phase in the majority. Exceptions including the likes, however, of the Heinkel 100D1, which will outclimb you significantly. Meanwhile, if you're a lower battle rating aircraft in the match, as depicted here, you'll find that your climb rate is marginalised massively, and that you'll be well behind the likes of the Messerschmitt 19 ML3s and the Spitfire Mark IIAs that you'll see. But against that, you do have a very consistent climb rate, in that you'll be able to gain a lot of altitude, in excess of 2,000 or 3,000 metres altitude in a single climb if you measure at a 25-degree climb angle, the starting speed of approximately 400 km an hour. And this means that you're able to get up to altitude in the background, whereas other people will be distracted engaging one another. And in return, it gives you the space to start attacking foes via boom and zoom approaches, such as depicted against that Messerschmitt 109 there, and we're now going to carry forward in towards this F222.2 bomber. And then going after bombers, you do have a very accurate amount of offensive firepower, in that it's all based in the nose, and therefore the lack of convergence reliance means you only need to point directly at the target. And in doing so, you may find that you're not able to bring the bomber down in a single pass simply because you do not have the ammo to do so, as you only have 60 cannon rounds available, and will need to go for reloads. But even with only 40 rounds available, as depicted there, we're able to do a critical hit on the F222.2, and with the assistance of our teammates, we've been able to bring the bomber down for another kill. This goes to show, firstly, that you've got the firepower to shred foes over time, but on top of that, that you need to be careful about your reloads and being caught shy on the amount of cannon ammunition you have available. As we drift towards this Messerschmitt 19 ML here, we know they get taken out by our friendly AA, and we're going to cheese a kill off of this Heinkel 111. Now what this is also going to show is that the stalling characteristics of the J1N1 are very strong, in that your stall speed is a low 110 km an hour, and your stall recovery is exceptionally fast. The plane will force itself down very quickly, you only need to build up your speed to 170 km an hour in level flight, and you're ready to go again. In terms of cheesing this kill, we only graze the Heinkel 111, and then it's taken out by our friendly AA over the airfield, but we get credited with the kill. And this is something you can do if you're stock, for example, and you're looking to pick up some kills that are practically being ignored. You can harass bombers that are flying low over your airfield, score a couple of hits, and that way when the AA takes the bomber out, you'll be credited with the kill most of the time. Now breaking back up to altitude a little bit at this point and going for another reload, and you'll see that we continuously go for reloads. We're using our stalling characteristics at this point to go over the top of another Messerschmitt 109, so that way we can come down on them and hit them hard. And what you can see here is, even at lower speeds, the J1N1 handles very nicely on its control surfaces. Now there's an ideal speed range in general flight for going into an engagement, and that is between 350 and 450 km an hour, at which point your control surfaces will be at their best. Coming on to control surfaces then, let's start off with your turn circle. Now your turn circle is slightly above average once again, in that you'll be able to outturn the likes of the Heinkel 100, the Messerschmitt 109 ML, the Yak-1, and you'll be slightly behind the likes of the MS-410, and then going on to the Spitfire Mark 1s that you're going to see, and definitely behind the likes of the A5M4, which means you can go into a good number of turn fights and surprise foes in how manoeuvrable you are. And the result of this is the fact that you're able to turn the tables on those who would like to force you into a 1 versus 1. More on that later, as we pick up 2 kills there, finishing off the ground attacking plane in the form of the V156. Now making our way back over the airfield and going for another reload, when we talk about controllability in turn fighting, let's think about our roll rate, or our ailerons. Your roll rate in this plane is average but very good for a heavy fighter, in the fact that you do not feel too far behind the fighters that you're going to face, excluding the biplanes of course. This means that you have the ability to change direction quite smoothly on the fly, and between 600 and 700 km an hour you will lose 50% of your roll rate. Now, this is not too much of a problem, because if you're able to predict the path of your foe when going into a boom and zoom pass, you'll be able to work around that drop in roll rate, but it is something you need to keep in mind. As for your rudder is your strongest control surface by far, in that this plane can flat turn considerably well for a heavy fighter, and with the ability to quickly switch on the rudder, what it means is when you're going into a turn fight, you can bring this plane's nose around very quickly and take foes by surprise. On top of that, when going into a boom and zoom pass, what you'll find is between 700 and 800 km an hour, you'll only lose 25% of your rudder's responsiveness. And the result of this is that you can maintain your accuracy in precision flying when going into a boom and zoom pass and follow your foes to get a clean shot on target, something which can be difficult with nose-mounted firepower when going into a high-speed boom and zoom dive. On top of that, you have to consider that your powerful rudder means that hammerheads are going to be very fun in this aircraft. But then finally coming onto the elevator, which is very close to the rudder in terms of overall performance, in that you have a strong elevator here. Now when going into a high speed dive, there is no lockup threshold, which means you can pull out of a dive at your maximum dive speed of 871 km an hour just as easily as you can in a dive at 400 km an hour, in the middle of your ideal speed range. And that enabled us to switch the elevator of this plane over to take out the G50 before trying to snap round towards the F222, but we decided instead to go for the Dornier 17 and then potentially consider attacking the French bomber from earlier, but we've broken off instead. Now your elevator does have some downsides, in that whilst your loop circle is generally rather good, and it's comparable almost to the likes of the Potes 630, which has an incredibly strong looping capability, you'll find that at 300 km an hour or less, conducting a loop in this plane is one of the most sluggish experiences you can have in looping an aircraft. And the result of this is, conducting a loop at such low speed, especially against single engine fighters who will be able to loop at these large speeds, will leave you in the dust. Planes such as the P-36 come to mind in this regard. But outside of that, you'll be able to use your elevator well, especially in high-speed engagements, in order to follow targets with loops, for example, where they may think they can use a loop to shake you off. Now, outside of all of that, we've been employing this plane particularly in an interceptor and boom and zoom role, simply because it does work very well in that regard. But again, we have to consider the turn fighter aspects, and we'll try to show those later. In the meantime, what else is there to note? Well, your dive acceleration is average, and this is where you can be caught out a little bit, in the fact that a good number of planes will be able to keep up with you in the dive, typically your monoplane counterparts, although biplanes, if they're given a 100 km an hour head start on you in a dive, will be able to keep up with you for a limited period of time. But this is where you can use your defensive armoured rather well, in the fact that the 4 machine guns you have will shred apart a biplane if you manually aim for its engines, and it means that when a biplane does get too close, you have that afforded comfort of being able to rip them out of your rear before they're able to do considerable damage to your aircraft. And this is important because your durability, which this brings us on to, is questionable. Now against light machine guns, which you'll typically see on the biplanes you encounter, such as on the KI-10, you'll find that those light machine guns are going to do very little damage to your airframe. But as soon as you start looking at heavy machine guns, i.e. the American 12.7mm Browning, alternatively 20mm cannon as mounted on this plane, alternatively on the likes of the equivalent of Yak-1, you'll find that this plane is no longer able to take the hit, and that's where you're going to have issue, particularly with the engines which are exposed and pick up damage rather rapidly. On top of it, you have to consider that your cockpit is rather exposed and that your pilot is going to become wounded if not knocked out if you leave them too susceptible to incoming fire, which is why going head to head with biplanes can work out very well, because you have the centerline mounted nose mounted firepower advantage. But when going up against planes with significantly chunkier armament, you'll be at a bit of a deficit, because if you start taking hits, you'll be wounded rather dramatically. And as for your control surfaces, when they're hit, they don't lose too much performance, although people are noticing at the moment that there seems to be either a bug or a new feature in the game, whereby if your pilot does get wounded, you will lose controllability of the aircraft. This applies across all planes, not just the J1N1, just keep that in mind. More on that as time goes on. But in this turn fight against the Heinkel 100D1 at this point, we're able to very quickly turn the tables on them following the initial turn, because we have that tighter turn circle and the maneuverability to come around, and that meant we could wipe them out of the sky very quickly. What about energy retention at this point? Because we have talked about boom and zoom and also in the regards to turn fighting. Well, you have a bit of a difficulty in terms of energy retention in boom and zoom, in that your energy retention is okay at best. If you dive from say 3,500 meters altitude down to 2,000 meters and then try to surge back up, you will get back to 3,500 meters altitude, but you'll have lost approximately 50% of your starting speed. And in return, this means that long distance boom and zoom charges are going to be difficult for you to escape if those are hot on your 6, or you do one through the enemy spawn and then planes spawn in and dive after you. So instead, you want to maintain short distance boom and zoom attacks or long distance boom and zoom attacks on isolated foes that you know you can get away from because they're at such low speed and at low altitude. Meanwhile, in the horizontal, the picture is better in that you do retain a lot of your speed when going into subsequent turns, and this is where this plane is going to surprise people once again, in the fact that when going up against fellow monoplanes, your turn fighting capabilities are consistent and maintained over the course of the turn fight simply because you retain so much speed. And note here how we snap between 2 targets in the boom and zoom pass, showing the high speed controllability of the J1N1 once again. Almost going for the third, but we don't want to risk the head on against the CR714, we just want to get out of here at this point, breaking away. And this brings us on to straight line speed retention. How well can this plane retain its speed? Not too well, unfortunately, because by the time you get down to 530 km an hour, that's when you start to really retain your speed, so you're going to throw away a lot of speed in those high speed dives when you level out initially. But with that, the game comes to its end, and it's time for us to take a look at the post-game stats. With our 12 kills and 2 assists, we're able to pick up 38,719 silver lions and 3,707 research points. To defeat the J1N1 in a given matchup then, I can recommend one or two approaches. The first, if you have the naturally tighter or equivalent turn circle, is to turn fight with this aircraft, and planes such as the Potos 630, the Spitfire Mark 1, and all the biplanes this plane is going to encounter come to mind. Just be wary of that defensive machine gunner and the need to eliminate them as soon as possible. Option number 2 for planes that do not have as good a turn circle, and this extends to the likes of the Messerschmitt 110, the MiG 315, and the Heinkel HE100D1, is to use boom and zoom or hit and run tactics against this plane. Because whilst it can keep an average pace of speed, it's not the fastest plane at its batter rating by far, and it really lacks the high altitude performance that some planes have. Where its ideal altitude range is 1,500 to 3,000 metres, at which point the plane is going to be performing at its maximum and embody its versatility. But by the time you go to 3,500 metres altitude, you'll be hitting the maximum altitude limit on the engines, and you'll see a considerable drop off in straight line engine performance. Add to that at 4,500 metres, the deprecation to its overall control surface capabilities will start to really bleed energy on its controls, and you'll find this plane struggles up at the higher altitudes, at which point you can reign supreme, using those boom and zoom tactics to attack this plane repetitively and bring it down over time. Alternatively, if you have like for like altitude performance, using high speed hit and run tactics at a speed of 500 km an hour plus when this plane is engaged against other foes will work very well. Because whilst the straight line acceleration of this plane from its stall speed of 110 km an hour to 350 km an hour is rather fast, or you can extend this threshold up to 440 km an hour with more emergency power. Beyond that point, its acceleration drops off dramatically, and it will really struggle to chase those who've hit it hard and fast and are breaking off into the distance. But by avoiding such circumstances in our own J1N1 today, what we've hopefully demonstrated is that this is a rather versatile heavy fighter at a low batter rating, which means that you have the ability to choose how you want to play it. When you are the top batter rating aircraft, you can afford to be rather aggressive and enact multiple boom and zoom passes against your biplane opponents that you'll typically see, or the very lightly armed and armoured bombers that you're going to see. Meanwhile, when you're at the lower batter rating end of the spectrum in the game, you have to be a little bit more conservative and considered in your approach, knowing when to strike and when to turn fight with those who want to engage you in a 1 versus 1. But in all, in terms of seeing this as the first of the J1N1 variants in game, I can definitely say that Irving's initiation is a successful one, and I look forward to seeing the Night Fighter variants in game in the near future, if they do arrive. With that, I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. But until next time, as always ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.